You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, Mr. Bob Harris on Twitter at Football Diehard, and Mr. Kyle Dvorchak at FF Kyle the Kid on Twitter. Mr. Harris, it is championship weekend. The season flew by. What is good in Albuquerque, New Mexico this evening, sir?
I don't know which of us sounds worse tonight. We'll both struggle through with limited voice issues. And otherwise all good here, of course. Some great games this past weekend, some great games ahead. Exciting times to be following the football. And as part of that, this time of year, as always, is coaching changes. A good quarter of the league is changing coaches. We talked about most of them last week, or all that had been committed to prior to that. And that, as we got close, it was Packers going with Matt LaFleur, Kliff Kingsbury in Arizona, Bruce Arians in, got them, all offensive-minded coaches. The following day was one of the pretty much the only defensive-minded coach going and getting a head coaching job. And if I find a little surprising, and maybe the only one more surprised was Vic Fangio himself, the 60-year-old defensive coordinator of the Bears, who seemed to be of the opinion that he would remain a defensive coordinator and wasn't head coaching material. Yet John Elway made the move to add him. Kyle, your thoughts just on, how bad is this for the Bears? And how bad is this for fantasy owners interested in the Broncos?
Fantasy owners interested in the Broncos. He's not like, he led a great Bears defense many years in a row, even when they had less talented. So I think, fantasy, it's probably just like a wash. And still, even before, Vance Joseph wasn't doing a very good job. So it might be addition by subtraction. It could just be having a league average coach is really what they needed. And then for the Bears, his team is so talented. Certainly, maybe they play down a little bit next year, but that's sort of going to be regression anyways. They've just played so incredibly well that it's going to be hard to separate those. And they're just incredibly talented. You look at all this they have on Mac, Jackson. It's just you can, the list goes on, and that's one of the biggest things for me is just how much talent they have. So I don't think Bears defense or Bears fans should be too concerned. And Broncos certainly, we're not going to get some. I doubt anyways. We'll get a crazy Sean McVay turnaround offense, but it's not the worst thing.
Right. And I guess, look, for starters, the Bears will be fine. They have the personnel. Chuck Pagano is the man they're hiring to fill in, and a very solid defensive coordinator, former head coach as well. Doesn't hurt him. On the other side of getting back to the Broncos, Justin, look, we all kind of had the impression it was going to be a Gary Kubiak thing. He ended up kind of withdrawing. It sounds like he wanted his son to get a prominent job, which he did. His son Clint Kubiak, now the quarterback coach of the Minnesota Vikings, where Gary Kubiak is the assistant head coach and an offensive advisor. Kevin Stefanski will remain the offensive coordinator there, so kind of an odd circumstance. There's some other thoughts about the Broncos here. The quarterback situation in particular is going to be key. Elway mentioned Case Keenum, a short-term fix. What are they going to do to address that problem? I think we'll leave the offensive coordinator aside. There was some interesting talk about some interesting assistants. Scangarello from the 49ers, Rich Scangarello, quarterback's coach, had a little trouble talking to him. But plenty of guys out there rotating around. But what's the quarterback situation?
It has to get better. The AFC West is on the up and up, and we saw that with the Chargers. Obviously, we're seeing it with the Chiefs this weekend. They're going to play the Patriots. Case Keenum has been okay, but when he was in Minnesota, he had a ton of talent around him. He had a fair amount of talent around him in Denver. We've gone through Brock Osweiler, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch. The list goes on and on. They almost seem plagued at this point in time. It'd be interesting in the upcoming months to see what happens, but Case Keenum got some money, so do you want to wait it out with him? Obviously, Demaryius Thomas is no longer there. Cortland Sutton is on the up and up, and it looks like a little bit of a rebuild for the Denver Broncos. On the defensive side of the ball, there's plenty of talent, but I think offensively, they got to get their act together if they have any premonitions of keeping up with the Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs going further in that division.
John Elway, great at playing quarterback. Less great at selecting quarterbacks, turns out. So Moving beyond that, the Browns promoted offensive coordinator Freddie Kitchens to the head coach. Justin, how happy are you with the continuity there?
Well, I mean, I think there's some familiarity, and Baker Mayfield, there was whispers that he said, this is a guy that I want. I was hopeful that we would see Josh McDaniels go into Cleveland and take on that job. It's interesting, he's from the Ohio area, Kyle, where you're at, and it just seemed like a good piece of him. I mean, if I was an aspiring head coach that wanted to revitalize my career as a head coach, and I think that Josh McDaniels will be eventually, all the pieces are in play on both sides of the field for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, it's evident, gentlemen. They got a sound run game with Nick Chubb, obviously Baker Mayfield. You went out and spent money on Jarvis Landry. You have a top 10 tight end in David Njoku. The list goes on. And on the defensive side of the ball, same thing. So it'll be interesting. I think that Baker Mayfield had some say in this. And, there's a level of comfortability. And similar to the Chicago Bears, I think the Cleveland Browns are on the up and up, and it's a good thing to see as fans.
Kyle, some local flavor on this hire, sir.
Yeah, this was I was really excited. I think Josh McDaniels wouldn't have been a bad hire, but it worked so well for the short period of time we saw Freddie Kitchens that why break up a good thing? Especially, I think it seems like he's a fan favorite amongst the coaching candidates we had. I'm excited despite being not a Browns fan from Pittsburgh, I'm just excited to be around this and see what. So I think this is a great internal hire.
Seeing an organization come from, where it's been for the last decade or more, the last 20 years essentially, to where it is now is great. And I like what Freddie Kitchens said, about yes, it was better, but it's not acceptable. I also, I do think this is one of those cases, and you see this sometimes where, he's an offensive coordinator that was going to draw interest as a head coach. You maybe weren't going to lose him this year, but next year, probably going to lose him at some point soon. I think they just were getting proactive. The good fit with Baker Mayfield, and I think that relationship seems to be a key. The Jets hired someone that nobody wants to have a relationship with. Certainly not the camera. Certainly not Twitter. Adam Gase hired as the head coach. Look, I think this is we can say what we want, about how he looked in his appearance at the press conference, the introduction, and it was odd. But there is no doubt. I'm being kind, all right? There's no doubt that Adam Gase is very respected in football circles. I mean, the people who make football decisions at the high level have a very high opinion of him. As a quarterback whisperer, and I think the final, the deal maker on this one was Peyton Manning put in a call to the Jets and said, hey, you need this guy. Sam Darnold there, the quarterback whisperer. They hired Greg Williams today. But in general, Kyle, I'll start with you. Where do you see this offense going?
For a young quarterback, I think I like we talked about last week, the Kliff Kingsbury hire, just because it has a crazy of what if the air raid is super, what if it's like, oh, passing is just that good. And then when you see what if, Freddie Kitchens is just this good of a fit. I'm not excited. It's not the worst. And when you think about, he was, I think he was 2 games under 500, in Miami. But those teams kind of sucked. They were pretty untalented.
Right,
so
look,
it's just
the year Ryan Tannehill was healthy, they went to the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that, there is a little something there. I just, we're all going to get caught up in, and that's why I hate some of these stories. You could not have looked goofier, Adam Gase, at that press conference. And the memes floating around with the flying taco. And, this is all fantastic stuff. But, man, we'd love to see him. And so you look at some of the skill players there. The Jets have a lot of money under the cap. Le'Veon Bell has been mentioned as a potential target for them. They seem more likely. The other team that has that kind of money that Le'Veon Bell has talked about is the Indianapolis Colts. Chris Ballard, from all the people I've talked to who cover the team on a daily basis, don't feel like he's the guy that's going to throw that kind of money at one player that he's going to continue to build. So it'll be interesting to see there. But the Jets, with another weapon or two, and we'll see what happens with Robbie Anderson. They locked up Quincy Enunwa. Chris Herndon, a young tight end on the rise. Yep. He has a little off-field to deal with.
Yeah, Gase has a reputation as kind of a tough coach to play for, right?
Right.
He kind of criticized Devontae Parker, and you think of that as a weird thing to do about your players.
Well, think about Jay Ajayi.
That's next. When they traded Jay Ajayi, one, there's no way Adam Gase would want a guy like Le'Veon Bell on his team, and two, Robbie Anderson's career for the Jets is over. There's just no way they get along, right? How is a guy like Robbie Anderson?
You would think there would be fist fights between the coach But, we'll have to see how it plays out. I'm sure, Adam Gase took this job knowing a lot of these things that are going to be issues. But I think maybe the difference here, you guys, is that in Miami, he had some say over the personnel. Mm-hmm. In New York, he will not. And maybe that's the best thing. Sometimes when you've demonstrated, a lack of, look, you got to get along with others. We all know that, although I don't really get along with Justin at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to do so much editing. You guys just verbally assaulting. It's incredible.
We still have managed to cobble it together. No, it's all good fun. But I do think that's going to be an issue. That's something that he's going to have to work on, and maybe he's learned a lesson. I'm hoping he's learned a lesson. Someone who hasn't learned his lesson, or any lessons, other than being really good at football, is Antonio Brown, who essentially, as Mike Tomlin put it, abandoned the team at their darkest hour. Didn't show up. If you didn't hear the whole story, the soap opera is going to be ongoing. I'll just set out the basics. And the basics are Antonio Brown was upset about something that happened in practice on Wednesday prior to the Week 17 game against the Bengals, a game they needed to win to go to the playoffs. And he ended up not playing in the game because he disappeared, right? He didn't answer any texts, didn't answer any calls. On Sunday, his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, called Mike Tomlin, said Antonio's ready to play. And Mike Tomlin said, well, not so much. And Brown was on the sideline for half the game before he left. Did not play. The Bengals won, but, the Steelers won, but didn't make it to the playoffs because of the situation. So we had going in the offseason that this is going to be an ongoing drama. Then Art Rooney 2 comes out. And if you saw Emmanuel Sanders on the pregame show, and he was fantastic, by the way. You guys like that?
Yeah, he was. He was
thought
really
he did
good.
A great job. But the way he laid it out, it was exactly correct. Art Rooney did not say any of the things Art Rooney said by accident. Art Rooney is a thoughtful man. The Steelers are an organization with, 3 head coaches in my lifetime, and I don't think many before that. Mm-hmm. They are a slow, deliberate organization. They're very cautious in their approach. They're very cautious in how they speak about things. And for him to say things like, it's hard to envision Antonio Brown being in the Steelers in training camp, things like that. And then the flirtations on social media, starting with George Kittle, moving on through others, currently with Jerry Rice, who is now lobbying for him to be a 49er. So there's a range of possible outcomes. And I'll start with you, Justin. And I'll start with what I still think probably is the most likely, but is becoming less likely the more Art Rooney talks, is Antonio Brown is the starting wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers on week 1 of the 2019 season. Where do you stand on that possibility?
I don't know. It's right. I mean, you're a guy, Bob, that you don't like to talk about the nonsense, right? You like to talk about what happens on the field. And this seems petty to me. And they're no stranger to, sophomore behavior. I mean, we saw a business deal gone bad with Le'Veon Bell. I mean, they're somewhat of a it's become a sad story despite the James Conner season. But tonight it doesn't look good. I would hope to think, like you said, this is a historic franchise that has not had a lot of head coaches. They're methodical in their procedure and how they operate. And obviously there's a rich history, and you don't want to just relinquish Antonio Brown. Surely as adults, you would hope that they could sit down, talk about something like this. But look, great wide receivers have come and gone within that organization. Emmanuel Sanders moved on. I think that, Antonio Brown was somewhat, they resemble each other. Mike Wallace and Hines Ward. So, and obviously Juju Smith-Schuster is there now. We could see the Pittsburgh Steelers a completely different team than we've been accustomed to seeing them over the last 4 or 5 years, minus Le'Veon Bell and minus Antonio Brown. But you would hope as fans, not only analysts, but as fans, that, it's nice to see Le'Veon Bell on the field at the same time as Antonio Brown. It seems petty tonight, but a lot of things happen that we don't know about. So
we hear a lot of things about Antonio Brown's, projecting an image that maybe isn't really true. Look, a lot of us do that. A lot of people do that on social media.
Sure.
And so I'm not going to knock him for that, nor am I going to knock him for some petty jealousies. But if things were going poorly, this would be a little easier to understand, right, Kyle?
Right.
I mean, and so let's just say the other side of the range of possible outcomes is Antonio Brown's playing somewhere else. And without speculating on that, I'm going to point to something Justin said. The Steelers have a long history of producing wide receivers. Antonio Brown was not a high draft pick, right? I mean, so who else besides Juju Smith-Schuster is on that roster that we might want to keep our eye on, Kyle?
Yeah, obviously I think it's washing. It'd be really funny if he had a good year next year, because then everyone would be like, oh, they absolutely knew, despite that being like, it could just be they were the going highest guy available, best rated guy available. But people will see them as having premonitions of this or some predetermined knowledge. But James Washington would be the guy for me, absolutely. I imagine that he would be the number one guy. And then also I love the explosive play potential of Vance McDonald. So that's another guy. Those would be like the two big guys for me right now. You can't like pay me to ever say anything good about Justin, despite him being on the roster, and like once a season he has a 7. So yeah, those would be the two guys I'm looking for right now. But also don't be surprised if we just look for free agency, especially if we get rid of Antonio Brown. That's a lot of money off the books. So if we look for somebody in free agency or someone else in the draft, because James Washington didn't make an impact, maybe we just try to double dip back into the draft. Well, quadruple dip considering how much success we've had drafting talent. But double dip in the past 2 years, I would say.
There will be a number of ongoing dramas. This will be one. You'll be able to follow at footballdiehards.com, because I'll be writing about Antonio Brown at least 3 times a day, every single day for the rest of my life, for at least the rest of this offseason.
Keep you busy.
I think more interesting is the Carson Wentz, Nick Foles dynamic in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, of course, out of the playoffs now, losing to the New Orleans Saints this past weekend. Not necessarily Nick Foles' problems. Yes, I'm talking to you, Alshon Jeffrey. That was mean. Gratuitous. But so the Eagles came out predictably. Head coach Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz is the guy going forward. Howie Rosen, the GM, basically saying the same. Nick Foles is due about 20 million. They have an option. He can buy out that option for $2 million. Nick Foles can. They have a $20 million option on him to keep him. He can buy that out for $2 million and move on. My guess is that's what's going to happen. So we'll kind of roll in that direction. Is that the way you would do it, Kyle?
Talk about range of outcomes. You were like, you said for the Antonio Brown thing, the most probable thing is that he stays on the team, because we haven't seen really anything like this transpire before. So the math in our brain says things will probably course correct and get back to normal. And my mind says, I think we probably see Nick Foles go elsewhere, because Carson is younger, appears to have had a higher ceiling, at least for a longer duration of time. Last he was healthy, and he was the higher draft pick. It just seems like everything logically points to Nick Foles leaving, Carson Wentz stepping up. They've said that. And then I think Nick Foles hits free agency, and we get maybe a heightened Case Keenum situation where a team is looking for either a short-term bridge or like a 3-year, 2-year contract. Bob, can you really imagine?
Oh, maybe it's Denver.
That'd be so funny. That'd be great.
Right. So as you look at it, and let's face it, Foles is great in the postseason. Hasn't necessarily over the course of his career, kind of call him a bit of a journeyman. Look, I think we see, that high end play in the postseason is going to make him a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Somebody. And
Absolutely.
So my question to you, Justin, is one Mike Dempsey asked me on the Sirius show, Football Die Hard show earlier this evening. Does he get closer to Kirk Cousins' money, or is it down closer to Case Keenum? It's not going to be Case Keenum, because he can get that staying in Philadelphia. It's going to be a little higher. But does he get that big guaranteed contract that all the quarterbacks are going to be looking for now?
I don't see why not. I mean, you talk about a resume booster. Look, there's some type of magic with Nick Foles. And look, you've said it numerous times. I've heard you say it. I mean, there is a need in the NFL for at least mediocre quarterback play, and there's a lot of teams are desperate for that. I think Nick Foles, in certain spots, is he Joe Montana? No, he's not. Is Carson Wentz the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles for the next 5-10 years? I would bet a fair amount of money that he is. Right. This guy was an MVP candidate.
Bingo.
So, we can put that to bed right now. But, hey, good for Nick Foles. I think, you mentioned the Broncos earlier, right? Well, why not? But, again, I mean, it feels like a kind of a Case Keenum situation. I mean, the talent's been around. Foles, the Eagles are pretty loaded on offense despite having a running game. But the fact of the matter is, gentlemen, this is Carson Wentz's team moving forward. In fact, in a few years, we'll be talking about him being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I think it's that clear.
Yeah, and I do think that we've talked about it a lot, and you mentioned it. But Steve Mariucci put it great. There was an NFL Network promo where he's, there are 7 billion people on Earth, and about 10 of them can play quarterback good enough to be NFL quarterback.
Right.
And actually, I would say it's about 20. But beyond that, it gets a little dicey, and you're kind of asking just guys. And maybe Nick Foles is slightly more than just a guy. I get that. And he was serviceable against the Saints, and we'll jump in and kind of take a look at last weekend's games before we get into the DFS implications of the conference championship week here. But it was the Eagles going against Saints in New Orleans. There wasn't a lot the first half. I mean, it was a kind of a different game than we expected, right, Justin?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be an absolute butt kicking, and it could have been a lot closer had Alshon Jeffrey not dropped that. He has to feel terrible. But I think it's fair to keep in mind, a football game is not decided by one play. You got to look at the chain events through the course of the game, and different things could have happened. It was a good run for the Eagles. They were hot. We've seen this time and time again, a hot team going into the playoffs, doing their thing, but they were not going to go into New Orleans and beat them. We saw Drew Brees. He's been doing this with Sean Payton since 2006 when they have united, 6-0 at home, have not lost in the playoffs. It's a great story. The Eagles are a great story this year. They were a terrific story last year as well. In fact, I like the Saints to go to the Super Bowl. But, all that being said, it's kind of a Cinderella story. The clock ran up and outgo the Eagles. But, going forward in terms of next year in the NFC East, there's a lot of parity there. It's an interesting division to watch going forward. The Cowboys are on the up and up. I think the Redskins are always going to be the Redskins, but in terms of the Eagles, and I think as fans, we want to see the Giants get better as well. But it was a nice story, and it has come to an end. And
so moving forward, we know Drew Brees turns 40. I think it was today. So they'll be playing the Rams, but the Rams got into this whole affair by putting it to the Cowboys, and again, in a way we might not have expected, by running the ball down their throat against a pretty tough defense, but not using Todd Gurley alone, using Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson, who has, over the last 3 weeks, single-handedly proven why anybody who pays Le'Veon Bell big money is out of their mind, right, Carl?
Right.
Yeah, I think last week, maybe even other weeks, we've chatted Justin. He's talking about certain running backs being engines for their offense. That can be true, but I think when you look at great offenses, it doesn't matter. Like, get a good offensive line, score a lot of points, give yourself juicy, light boxes for your running back to crush, and then, that's the recipe. And that's why you don't, like you said, that's why you don't pay Le'Veon Bell. That's why you don't pay Todd. That's why you pay Todd Gurley and then give C.J. Anderson.
But maybe you regret it after you sign C.J. Anderson. Either way, it was a good game. Dallas sets themselves up. Look, I was impressed with Dallas over the course of the last half of the season with Amari Cooper. A lot to be excited about heading into next season. Might be more exciting if they dump Scott Linehan. Sounds like they won't, although it's not totally determined. But nonetheless, the Cowboys will be some popular fantasy plays next year. The Chargers and the Patriots, that was a Sunday game. Patriots turned back into the Patriots. Shocking, Justin, or not?
No, it's not shocking at all. You give Bill Belichick a week to prepare, which is exactly what they did. Another nice Cinderella story, right? I mean, the Road Warriors. Anytime, any team, any place, the Chargers, I thought it was going to be a tighter game. Their secondary was fantastic. Their defense as a whole was good. We saw a solid running game. Phillip Rivers was Phillip Rivers, but it was the vintage New England Patriots this weekend that we saw, and they clicked, and they might be peaking at the right time. And the scoreboard doesn't even indicate how lopsided that this game was. I mean, they came together as a defensive unit. Sony Michel had 3 touchdowns. James White was involved early.
15 catches.
Yeah, Julian Edelman was Julian Edelman. Gronk looked like, Gronk did his thing in the blocking game. So it's, this is a New England Patriots team, and I'm not going to rule them out in Kansas City this weekend. They played each other, and it was a shootout. The weather is going to be ridiculously cold.
Icy.
Ridiculously cold. So I can't envision it to be 40 to 30 or something like that. This is going to be low scoring. Do you envision a lot of points?
I'm weather agnostic. Stop it. You know that.
Yeah.
But so I think the point that I would worry about, and I'm just kind of half joking because I'm just trying to demonstrate, football played in inclement weather since day one. It's a winter sport. So look, I'm not saying doesn't get any easier, but if there's no precipitation or whatever, I will say though, Kyle, and maybe you could chime in on this. Where did that Chiefs defense that took on the Colts come from, and what happens if they show up this week?
Where they show up, I talked about it last week. They're so much better at home. It's something about getting that home field advantage, playing at Arrowhead. They seriously are like I'll pull it up later, I think, but it's something along the lines of like 11 and change DraftKings points as a defense to like 4 and change. It's light and dark when you look at them staying in Arrowhead to leaving the comfort of home. I think, against the Patriots, a team that despite how much we thought the Colts were a well-run, well-coached, and talented offense, Patriots are another monster entirely. We won't see that defense again unless it is potentially because the game goes down because of the weather, which, Bob, I'm sort of with you, though. The people, we've talked about this on the show. Does defense matter? Probably, but do people overrate it? Yes, I feel the same way with weather. People are going to be terrified of it. The total in this game started at like 59, 58, depending on where you look. It's dropped up to 4 points already. I don't think it's really worth nearly that much. I even saw sportsbooks were just dropping it because they knew the bets were going to come in. They got out ahead of it to get ahead of the plethora of under bets coming in. I'm not gonna be one of those guys if I'm sports betting. If I'm at the DraftKings sportsbook, that's not where my tickets are gonna go. So I still think this could be maybe this lowers the range of outcomes, or maybe there's a bit more of a floor potential for this game. But I still think the ceiling is just as high as it.
Yeah. So for the Colts, obviously not a great game, but boy, again, another team where the future is bright. Yep. Great offensive line, a little change of offensive line coaches. A little bit understandable when you get to details if you didn't hear about it. The guy that was there was hired by Josh McDaniels. Frank wanted his own guy. No hard feelings. Moving on. But great personnel. You have Andrew Luck. You have some dynamic players in the downfield game, including T.Y. Hilton, including all the tight ends, whether it's Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle will be back, and some bodies beyond that. Maybe they need a good wide receiver 2 there. Maybe they need some good pass rushers there. I'm sure Chris Ballard will be addressing that in the offseason. Whatever the case, that sets up our conference championships for this Sunday. We'll start with the early game is the Rams at the Saints. We saw these teams play in Week 9. It was phenomenal. The Rams were doing quite well against them until Drew Brees and Mike Thomas. You can't guard Mike, I'm told. It pretty much, the second half kind of, Alvin Kamara was a big factor. But the Rams can play with these guys in New Orleans. Then we have, of course, the Patriots at the Chiefs, late afternoon game in the cold weather. So let's talk DFS. I'll start with you, Kyle, at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking mostly at, in this game at least, Drew Brees. He absolutely crushes at home, and so do the games in general. It's just an amazing place to play football if you like DFS, if you like offense. But that just brings me absolutely to Drew Brees. Not only so, if the Rams, say, do well, get up early, they're going to run the ball a ton. And if they go down early, that could very well be because we've seen the Saints defense really power up in the second half. So it seems like if he's going to go off, you're like fitting through the tiniest keyhole. So I'm all Drew Brees if I'm going in this game. And I'll probably be pretty split on my ownership between Drew and we'll talk about it later.
All right, Justin.
Like you said, these teams played before. Look, Drew Brees at home on a fast track. They're going to win this football game. And I think if the Rams win this football game, have to get that ground game going. It's not just Todd Gurley. Like you said, it's C.J. Anderson bouncing around there with the shirt untucked, look like Jerome Bettis.
Got the big sweatshirt on underneath.
Yeah, it's interesting story Anderson was. We saw him go to Carolina to kind of compliment Christian McCaffrey, and they said, you know what, we're going to give Christian McCaffrey the football, have a lot more than he did in the prior season. So, one man's trash is another man's treasure. But if the Rams are going to be successful, they're going to need to rush for over 100 yards, 125 yards, open things up. Brandon Cooks coming home to New Orleans, he obviously the Saints drafted him, another 1,000-yard season for Brandon Cooks, like the revenge narrative there. But it's going to be the Saints. It's going to be a lot of Alvin Kamara and a lot of Michael Thomas. Gentlemen, a question I have for you both. Can you tell me a better wide receiver in the NFL tonight than Michael Thomas? I mean, maybe DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Julio Jones.
Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, you can make arguments for a number of guys, but Mike Thomas is in that argument. My problem with Mike Thomas over the course of the season are the games he disappears. And, I mean, I guess everyone does that. It seemed more pronounced for him this year.
Fair enough. So give me look, it's going to be a shootout. Obviously, the weather is not going to come into play here. This is what the NFL wants, pass-happy league. What Jared Goff are we going to see? Are we going to see Jared Goff that looks like Tom Brady that absolutely gashed the Minnesota Vikings? Or are we going to see Jared Goff, the Blake Bortles facsimile, so, very Sean McVay kind of hides him, disguises him, with the running game and obviously the usage of Todd Gurley and now CJ Anderson, CJA. So there's going to be some points in this game. The weather's not going to play into it. It'll be a damn good one to watch.
All right, fair enough. So who are we looking at running back?
It's probably not going to be. I'm not going to have Todd Gurley. The Saints were outside of the Bears the best at plugging the run. So, I'm going to pay down a little bit. I think CJ Anderson's going to get the football. I'm going to spend $5K. As a whole this weekend, I'm going to want me some, talking about all four teams here, it's going to be some Sony Michel, then it's going to be some James White, particularly James White, because DraftKings, which sponsors this show, is a PPR site. I know that Sony Michel plunged in 3 touchdowns this past week. For me, it's going to be James White. I will not pay $7,500 for Todd Gurley, although he hovers around $10K during the regular season, and he'll get the football 20-something times. But again, the Saints have been absolutely fantastic. Everybody and their mother will be on Gurley. I think he's a decent fade because of the matchup.
Kyle?
Justin, I love it. I'm actually in 100% agreement. In the past 2 seasons where we've known the Rams offense to be the Rams offense, in the 7 games that the total of the game has been at 52 or higher, we've seen Todd Gurley see about 2 and change carries less per game and about a point less fantasy points per game. And we really saw this stick out in their previous meeting with the Saints, where they were pretty much getting beat up by halftime. He had 13 carries, 7 targets, was held under 100 yards and under 20 points. I think he scored once, which really saved, completely melting down. But I think that could be what we see again. Justin, you said you picked the Saints to win this with relative ease. It sounded like you were pretty confident in that pick. I would say I'm somewhere with you, and that leads me off of Todd Gurley, and it also leads me to Alvin Kamara, who you brought up. If I'm choosing a running back from this game, we much have to. That's exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to go Alvin Kamara. I think CJ Anderson is a decent bet, but I do want to point out that I'd like to point out that they had a true committee go. Through 3 quarters, him and Todd Gurley were 14 carries apiece. In the final corner, it seemed pretty closed up. So he actually out-carried Todd Gurley 9-2. So that's where a lot of his carries came from. So the discrepancy isn't as huge in terms of I think if the game is close, what we'll see. But I'm not paying $7,500 for a committee. If I'm paying $7,500, I want that OG, that good Todd Gurley, and I don't think you're going to see it. So one last point I'd like to make is looking at the receivers who, if you're the Rams and you're down, hopefully you're throwing the ball a lot, or at least that's what a smart team would do. And that's pretty much what we've seen from them, like I said, with Todd Gurley getting 13 carries in a blowout. I want to look at the receivers, and I'm specifically looking at Robert Woods, who operating about half the time out of the slot will get the P.J. Williams matchup. That's the matchup you want to get on terms of these corners. He's their slot corner, and he's outside of PFF's top 100. That's where I'm going to look to. It's going to be good Robert Woods if I'm going to receiver.
I buy that. By the way, just one other note on the Rams. Their offensive line right now, I mean, that's key factor, and it's going to be a great matchup with that Saints front line. So, Justin, wide receivers here for you. Let's look at the Saints side. Is there anyone who is the dart toss here in your tournament for you?
Oh, you guys mentioned Ted Ginn. I'm not a Ted Ginn advocate by anyone. In fact, his hands are terrible. We saw we did in Carolina. He's initially a special teams guy from Ohio State, right, Kyle? So it's Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is like shades of Marcus Colston, right? I mean, I think you can depend on Thomas for 10 to 15 targets every week. But look, for me, on the Saints side of the ball, if they're going to be successful, it's going to go through Alvin Kamara. It's going to go through Michael Thomas. And, we at points in the season, we talked about Traquan Smith kind of disappearing act. We've seen that before with rookie wide receivers. I don't have a lot of interest in any pass catching options on the Saints offense aside from Thomas and aside from Alvin Kamara, because despite Alvin Kamara's carries, like Christian McCaffrey, touches are the new carries, right? And these guys, even though they're not getting 250 carries, they're getting 80, 90, 100 receptions. And so for me, again, it's going to be Michael Thomas, it's going to be Alvin Kamara, and I will pay a premium for both.
Can you touch any of the tight ends in this game, Justin?
I don't think that I can. I mean, we're not seeing vintage Jimmy Graham. Fine, I will throw one dart out there, and it'll be Gerald Everett. We've touched on him during the regular season. I think that we're optimistic for kind of young Jared Cook-esque. He's a hybrid tight end, fast, long, lengthy. That had a little bit of success, shade under 10 points the first time these two teams met. 2,700. Fine. If you don't feel like paying way up for Travis Kelce and $3K less for Rob Gronkowski. I mean, it's amazing.
And that sweet matchup for Gronk.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if vintage Rob Gronkowski shows up. So it's hard not to spend $4,100 for Gronk. So I'll probably have 100% Rob Gronkowski just because of who he is and how discounted he is. But it's probably not going to be Tyler Higbee. I suppose you could flip a coin, Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee. For me, it's Everett. I think he's the more talented of the two tight ends. I know that the Rams like him, and there were points in the season where he showed a little bit of flash, but when push comes to shove, in fact, Gerald Everett had a good game week 11 against the Kansas City Chiefs. So if that's any indication what Gronk can do against them, these two tight ends, Everett and Higbee, fall smack dab in the middle of the sea of mediocrity. So not a lot of love, but if you can get me 10 points, 2,700, I'm content with that.
Kyle Dvorchak at FF Kyle the Kid, the defense whisperer of this podcast. I go to you, sir, and start with this game and then expand to the other game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm depending on how I feel about the shootout, which this game, it's probably going to be a shootout. I could see myself maybe having a few shot in the dark lineups where basically what we saw with the Rams Chiefs was there was an incredible amount of scoring, but guess what? The Rams have an incredible amount of talent. So even if there's so much scoring, that also means they're on the field a lot. And when you put that team on the field a lot, maybe they score 2 touchdowns. So I don't think the Rams are the worst shot. Really, defense is going to be so random this week. It's going to suck when a team just goes for 30 and every other team gets washed. But, that's kind of the nature of the game in these really high variance playoff slates, especially with 2 games. So I think I could see myself getting into that. But the team I'm looking to really get into is the Chiefs. We did it last week. Hopefully, if you listen, we did it last week. And it turned out well. I think they've got the best matchup. I think if the cold thing plays into it, it's a lower scoring game where they have a high floor. And if it's a higher scoring game, I like them to maybe get basically the Rams argument where they've been great at home. Even if the Patriots are having the ball a lot in the field, there is a chance we get some turnovers, a chance we get a touchdown. And also the Patriots, it's funny when you look at, Justin talks about this a lot, when you look at opposing points allowed by position on DraftKings defense right now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're priced in reverse order. So I think the pricing is really good here. My number one, by far and away, is going to be the...
All right, we're going to climb up the position tree to quarterback in this game, but we're going to start with the tight ends. So Justin and I have kind of let you know where we stand. We like kind of both these tight ends in this game. I think maybe Justin, if I can speak for you, you and I are going to have some Gronk, some lineups. Kyle, where are you at on the tight ends in this game?
I mean, everything about Gronk says no. Says he's a garbage. He's had 6 targets in their games without Josh Gordon. When you look at Julian Edelman and James White, 29 respectively. He's also behind Chris Hogan, Philip Dorsett, Rex Burkhead. He's been a non-factor. Justin, you said he was out there a lot and he was blocking the entire time. I could still, considering the matchup, they have allowed a lot of points to tight ends, and a lot of that is just they allow a lot of points to because they score so many the same if try and keep up. So everything about Rob Gronkowski's season, about the way he looks, what they're using him for right now, says he's a garbage play. But the situation is the exact opposite. A shootout against a team that is so juicy in the playoffs. I'll have some exposure to him, but I'm really going to be mostly concentrated on Kelsey. I think a lot of my exposure may actually come in because he's so cheap, but I still think he has, even if his highest yardage upside is maybe 100 yards, which I think he's hit once this season, I still think he has 100 yards or 75 yards and 2 to 3 touchdown upside. I think that's the one place that's most athletic anymore. He's still 6'7" and super jacked. That could be the one place in the red zone that would still get a decent amount. So I'm actually interested in running Kelsey Gronk stacks. Everything you do is a stack when you have 4-game teams. But I'm interested in getting differentiation is something that we haven't talked about yet because we're just running through the games right now, but getting differentiated lineups so you can actually win tournaments and not split first with 20 other people is going to be really hard. I think Kelsey's going to be super high owned and Gronk he's going to be the second highest owned because that's how they're priced. Getting both of them might be a way to get exposure to both of them in the same lineup, might be a way to get exposure to both of them without the ownership crush that it's going to be to have only Travis Kelce.
Points well taken there, and I think it's a damn good idea. And I do agree. I mean, Kelsey's the obvious play, but there's something. It was maybe that 125-yard catch where we saw the flash of the old Gronk, and I'm just a sucker for it.
Yeah.
The blocking, though, was incredible. Justin, wide receivers in this game. Who do you like?
Tyreek Hill went absolutely bananas when they first met, when these two teams met. And when Kyle was talking about Travis Kelce, and I think Bill Belichick has a tendency he's gonna try to take some of it away. No longer do you have to worry about Kareem Hunt, despite Williams playing very efficiently. Sammy Watkins is a sneaky play now that he's healthy. Bob, I know how you feel about Sammy Watkins. I think he's a damn good wide receiver, and I think he can be a difference maker. But in terms of comfort, if there's one wide receiver that I want to take for this, bang for my buck, it's going to be Julian Edelman, and it's going to be, contingent upon the, nonverbal communication that I like to talk about all the time that Tom Brady has with Julian Edelman. It's unprecedented. 13 targets, 9 receptions last week. I mean, it's over. History repeating itself. It's just what they do, and they're on the same page continuously. Now he doesn't have a huge knack for the end zone, Edelman, but 13 targets. It seems like he has 10 targets every week. He'll probably have 8 receptions this game. Doesn't matter how cold it is. I'm fine with Julian Edelman. I think Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill is an interesting character to me. He doesn't, when you look at him, he doesn't come off as this, or he didn't, this polished wide receiver that, he's right running. He's really improved in that regard as a wide receiver. So I think a lot of people be on Hill, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if Bill Belichick wants to remove Tyreek Hill from the game, and Sammy Watkins gets a lot of the looks, because he's not going to, Bill's not going to allow what Tyreek Hill did to the Patriots the first time these two teams met. So for me, it's Edelman. I'm going to pay down a little bit. It's going to be Sammy Watkins, because we know what his capabilities are. Healthy Sammy Watkins with Patrick Mahomes could be good. 6 catches, 8 targets last week. At his price, $4K, I'm fine. I think Sammy Watkins, he's healthy. He obviously has Patrick Mahomes now. Sammy Watkins is a top 25, 30 wide receiver in the NFL. He did some special things in Buffalo. It was short-lived, but give me Watkins, give me a Julian Edelman in this game.
Yeah, and it was week 6, I'm sorry. It was 43-40 win for the Patriots. Had their, very, very easily could have gone the other way, about an interception away. So, Kyle, where are you at on the wide receivers for this one?
Yeah, I really just want to hammer down on the Sammy Watkins thing. 4K, when you look at it, is incredible, because you're paying over 5 for, I think, pretty much everybody you're comfortable with. I personally like Ted Ginn at 4,300. I know, Justin, he's not a guy you're into, but when you look at it, he's played, I believe this is 6 games with the Saints this year, and it has been over 5 targets in every one but one. And over the 5 games he played in the regular season, if you just look at those 5 games, he led the team in air yards, because he's freaking Ted Ginn. That's what he does. He just goes deep. And it's ironic, we talk about so many times, had Ted Ginn had he caught the deep ball, God, he would have had a 200-yard game. Ted Ginn was there for the deep ball. Who knows if he would have caught it, but it was actually the quarterback who how often, that Drew Brees missed Ted Ginn, as opposed to, Ted Ginn dropped it as that, but really had that connected, it would have been the absolute, nuts play for Ted Ginn. And he got 7 targets and connect on him. He has the same upside that he does every slot, buying into that. But just generally, it's those 2 guys I'm paying down for. Sammy Watkins, who had 8 targets. He went 6 catches, 8 targets, 62 yards. He's still only 4K flat on DraftKings. You're getting a decent amount of volume, it would seem to be, on the best offense in the NFL. I don't see how that's the absolute jam in play. We'll have to see how ownership plays out. I think as we start getting more information, we'll start learning who everyone's going to be on. But this early in the week, I can't find a way to get off him. And then Travis Kelce really has had a handful of quiet weeks. He hasn't gone over 21 points December 2nd. That's a long time ago. Whereas Tyreek Hill, like Justin said, crushed them. He's crushed them every time he's played them. It was an absolutely awesome game they played, and he destroyed. And he just has that upside every single week. Whereas I'm not so sure Kelce has that same, borderline 50-point upside, where I think Tyreek Hill has the most 40-point games this season, or if not, he's tied. So I love the upside you're getting there, and you sort of just have to go for complete ceiling plays. Also, one more thing, Damien Williams is just a god in the running game in terms of running backs. He was in the top third in yards per target. The whole season combined, he's caught 28 of his 30 targets, 185 yards, touchdowns. I love what we're getting with Damien Williams. I think he'll be maybe one of the chalkier plays, so you really have to look for differentiation, where maybe that's where you go with Gerald Everett as opposed to Travis Kelce, hoping that you get a large equity of the scores out of Damien Williams. Travis Kelce doesn't score, and that's all you need. So I think if you're playing Damien Williams specifically, because he was he might have been the highest owned guy last week, and then he crushed, he's going to be even higher owned. He might be the highest owned guy again. So I think if you play Damien Williams, who's a great play, you do have to go with some of the differentiation we've talked about. Bob, did I ramble on long enough?
Yeah, you were good there. Justin, ramble a bit yourself.
Yeah, I can certainly ramble. Look,
Well, yes.
what happened? Who is Kareem Hunt, right? Where is he? We remember who Kareem Hunt was, right? And now it's Damien Williams. They gave him some money, and now he's all of a sudden the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. I tend to agree with Kyle. 6,400. A lot of people are going to be on Tyreek Hill. A lot of people are going to be on Kelsey. I think Williams will be highly owned. The Patriots running game, they're setting you up. Nibble, nibble, nibble. Home run, and it starts with their running game. And like I talked about earlier, it's the yin and yang here. Even a little Rex Burkhead. Everybody was marching their way into the end zone last weekend. For me, it's going to be James White. It's very similar to Julian Edelman. James White, we've time and time again. James White is like one of the centerpieces of the New England Patriots offense, and it's going to be 15 receptions, 17 targets. Why get away from that at this point in time? Sony Michel, he's good. Is he first round talent good? I don't know that he is at this point in time. Was fantastic last weekend. He's not the fastest guy in the world. 5,600. I'm gonna take a little bit of a discount and have James White for 5,400. You could make an argument to use both of those guys based on price, but if I'm going to flip a coin, I want my side to land on James White. Primarily, what he does in the passing game. I think he finished in season-long leagues as RB8.
Yep, I hear that. Go ahead, Kyle.
Last week, or maybe a lot of weeks because the Patriots be favored, we talked about Sony Michel being good play because you expect them to get up early and be able to run. Vegas doesn't have that happening this week, and for that reason, I just wanted to hop on with Justin there. James White is the play for me out of this backfield, and also that gets you on to fading Sony Michel, who absolutely popped off last week. But the game script doesn't seem to set up for him. And we're talking about differentiation. Fading Sony Michel is making.
James White is always the answer to every question. Quarterback, run through him for me, Kyle.
I don't know. How do you not get? I'm trying to find my differentiation elsewhere outside of Patrick Mahomes. He's the home favorite at Arrowhead, and he is, truly had one of the greatest, arguably the greatest quarterback season ever. Depending on your scoring format, if it was just standard, whatever PPR, half PPR, any of that, he was the highest scoring quarterback we've ever had. I think on DraftKings he fell 0.8 or 0.9 points short of Peyton Manning's great season, I believe. So yeah, I don't see how you don't get on that, especially considering that Justin, you talked about guys like Todd Gurley and Alvin Kamara are pushing 10K normally, and they're priced down. I believe DraftKings did that because if you don't price the guys down, you basically play two studs and you're just, 10 Keith Kirkwoods on this slate. So everyone's priced down. You can afford a little more to pay up at quarterback. I do think Patrick Mahomes is the best bet to.
Justin Lonero?
Take the weather, because I do think it's going to be play a role, and I know you don't think it is, but very, 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 very cold. I can't envision a shootout here. Look, the Patriots top 3 or top 4, PFF has them ranked in terms of their secondary. They're good. 23-year-old Patrick Mahomes, again, you guys were pretty cynical about him this offseason leading through the regular season, performed better away from Arrowhead Stadium than he did at Arrowhead Stadium. So it's difficult, even if you play for the Kansas City Chiefs, just a difficult environment. 31 touchdowns on the road, 19 at home. Gentlemen, Tom Brady, right? It's Tom Brady. The Patriots struggled on the road this season, and we're certainly not accustomed to that, and they're flawless just about at Gillette Stadium. But this is Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game. How can you bet against him? I think from a comfort standpoint, I feel more comfortable about Tom Brady than 23-year-old Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead Stadium in 2-degree weather, opposed to arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. So I don't think there's a wrong answer, although the wrong answer is probably Patrick Mahomes. It's Tom Brady for me, and that's not just because I reside 20 miles outside of Foxborough.
Yes,
Stadium.
it is.
It's not. I'll tell you what. And I said this about Andrew Luck last week, and it didn't work out. These are the type of games where we're going to see what type of stones this kid has. This separates you from being good and being great. I know it's early to say that about Patrick Mahomes because, again, you guys still there's room for optimism, but it's going to be a good one. It'll be a real good one, and it could be. Look, I don't know why this game couldn't be low scoring, and I don't know why the running game could be a huge factor just because of how cold it is.
Justin Lonero, who still fries his bread in Wesson oil. Google that one, kids, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Justin, we're gonna have new listeners that actually think that we were the ones down on Patrick Mahomes. Like, I hope
Our
you know
little
that, like,
skeptic,
yeah,
Justin Lonero. We're gonna close this one out, but I am gonna throw out a little story that's coming out now. David Tepper, the owner of the Panthers, first-year owner, did his first sit-down interview, discussed the possibility of holding Cam Newton out for the entire 2019 season. Obviously not ideal, but he pointed to the success the Colts had doing that with Andrew Luck. Obviously, they would need another good plan B at quarterback if they were going to do that. But that's probably a story we will be talking about more in depth next week and through the entire offseason. By the way, along with Antonio Brown. Probably haven't heard the last of him. Maybe not Gronk either. And they're probably the other one. So we'll close this one out on that note. A little Cam Newton news. You'll get the full story if you go to the footballdiehards.com website, along with all kinds of other fun things, including this podcast and our little skeptic, Justin Lonero.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to bring the show to a close. One more thing, Justin. All of the quarterbacks that are not named Tom Brady on the slate have as many 40-point games this season as he has 30-point games. He doesn't get to respond. That's the end of the show, everyone. If you want to find us, get your Football Die Hard pod updates. Find us. Find me, Kyle Dvorchak, on Twitter at FKyleTheKid. Find Bob at Football Die Hard and Justin Lonero at Justin Lonero. Thanks for listening, everyone.